Hi, students of history, and welcome to Miss Evans's European History. Together, we'll discover the people and ideas that transformed Europe. Today, we're going to focus mainly on France. Before we begin, however, it's important to remember that 17th century Europe developed two contrasting models of government. As you learn through the study of John Locke and Thomas Hobbes, England moved toward a parliamentary monarchy in which the monarch governed according to law and shared power with Parliament. In contrast, France under Louis XIV represented political absolutism, in which the monarch centralized authority and governed without requiring Parliament's approval. The Parliament in France was different from the Parliament in England in more ways than the difference in spelling. In France, Parliament was a high court that registered royal decrees and could formally object to them. The Parliament of Paris was composed mainly of judges and legal officials, known as magistrates. Most belonged to the wealthy nobility of the robe, whose families had purchased or inherited their government offices. It was not an elected legislature like the English Parliament. Louis XIV assumed personal control of the French government after the death of Cardinal Mazarin in 1661. He ruled as an absolute monarch and embraced the divine right of kings, the belief that his authority to rule came from God. Earlier you learned that Henry IV, Henry of Navarre, issued the Edict of Nantes in 1598, granting limited religious protections to French Protestants known as Huguenots. Louis XIV, however, believed that religious uniformity would strengthen France and reinforce his authority. After years of increasing persecution and forced conversions, he revoked the Edict of Nantes in 1685 through the Edict of Fontainebleau. The revocation strengthened France's official Catholic identity and Louis's alliance with the Catholic Church. The consequences of the Huguenots were severe. Their churches and schools were closed, Protestant worship was prohibited, ministers were ordered to leave France, and children were to be raised as Catholics. Although Huguenots were generally forbidden to emigrate, many fled secretly. Their departure deprived France of skilled merchants, artisans, professionals, and other productive members of society. Although Louis XIV, the Sun King, became the leading example of absolute monarchy, his power was not completely unlimited. He governed through ministers and councils and had to work with France's established laws, customs, courts, and regional institutions. Nevertheless, he successfully centralized royal authority and greatly reduced organized resistance to his rule. Versailles began as a hunting lodge built by Louis XIV's father, Louis XIII. Louis XIV transformed it into an enormous and lavish palace designed to display the wealth, power, and magnificence of the French monarchy. Versailles became the center of French political and court life, housing thousands of nobles, royal officials, servants, and guards. By requiring leading nobles to spend time at Versailles, Louis drew them into an elaborate court culture that allowed him to supervise them and limit their political independence. Known as the Sun King, Louis presented himself as the center of the French state, just as the planets were believed to revolve around the sun. Louis XIV fought a series of wars intended to expand France's territory, strengthen its borders, and increase Bourbon influence in Europe. France gained territory in the Spanish Netherlands and in a territory of Spain. However, Louis's expansion alarmed other European powers, which formed alliances to preserve the balance of power. Louis fought against a broad European coalition commonly called the Grand Alliance. This happened between 1688 and 1697 and is known as the 9 Years' War. This alliance included England, the Dutch Republic, Spain, the Holy Roman Emperor, and several German states. The costly war ended with the Treaty of Ryswick, which forced Louis to surrender most of his recent territorial gains and largely halted French expansion toward Germany. Although Louis XIV was a powerful monarch, his costly wars and lavish court left France deeply in debt. After his death in 1715, the Duke of Orleans became regent for 5-year-old Louis XV and restored the Parliament of Paris's right to object to royal decrees. To address France's financial crisis, Scottish financier John Law established a bank and controlled the Mississippi Company, which held a trading monopoly in Louisiana. Speculation caused the company's stock price to soar, but its collapse in 1720 created a financial panic and forced Law to flee France. During the 18th century, the Parliament of Paris became an important center of opposition to royal taxation and other policies. We'll end today's PowerPoint with a focus question. How did Louis XIV's rule strengthen the French monarchy while creating long-term problems for France? Take a minute to ponder, review, and respond.